Hello, and welcome to the Wizard's Respite Sanctorum, the show where we talk about all things TTRPG and nerdy and fun. Today we got a especially deep dive nerd show that we're going to be talking about. This is for the real hardcore RPGers out there, the dungeon masters, the GMs, the ones that eat this stuff up. But as usual, I am not alone. I am joined by my good buddy and co-host Zach. Zach, how are you doing today?
Hello, everybody. I'm Zachariah with Old Man Gaming. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about systems. I have been the forced dungeon master for most of my life. So I'm very excited to talk about systems, especially I think this will be a really interesting conversation too, because I would fairly say that while me and Wiz share many thought processes, I would say that Wiz is much more stat oriented and I am fail to comprehend them on a regular basis. So I think this will be a nice point counterpoint,
I think so too, and that kind of goes into something else. Like you say that you are less stat oriented, but I have found that I think a lot of GMs, and I could be wrong because I do go at things particularly initially with a lot of math in mind when I'm building monsters, when I'm building settings and stuff like that. But it got to the point where it just sort of became sort of a second like hand knowledge thing. I just did it instinctively. And your games are super well balanced. I've never felt like they were too easy that I played in, and I've never felt like they were too hard. Now your game is harder, but it's not too hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking specifically about single mod, the thought process that went into its creation, and I'm not trying to plug or anything. Wiz brought this up, but
it's part of the thing. It's a part of the thing. I want to look at the different maths.
The thought process of the maths is anybody who hasn't played it or hasn't looked at it. It is 6 stats, and then basically 5 skills to start. Nothing is above the number 5. Most of the time, nothing's above the number 3. My thought process when going to single mod was the system always slows me down as a game master. I often show up to game master games and I'm not prepared because I don't have the stats ready. I don't have the characters ready. I don't have the monsters ready. And like most of the games that I've played or game mastered or run, I always feel like I'm gonna let everybody in a little secret. I have imposter syndrome like nobody would believe. I feel like I'm a great con man, and that has somehow afforded me all the things I have in life. And it all stems from being a game master, because game master would be like, hey, we got this game, we really want to play it, and then they give it to me, and I would have a hard time reading it because of just the way my brain works, and I would have a hard time retaining information because of the way my brain works, and then I would have to like make up these very complicated bad guys and stats and stuff. So what always ended up happening was I never failed to have a GM screen, and I would have just nothing behind it other than a notebook and dice, and I would constantly be like, okay, they mean this guy, I think he'd be strong. He's got a plus here, a plus here, a plus here. And I just like write down pluses, and like, which to me always felt like a cop out. It felt like I'm kind of like not truly preparing the world for them, but I'm just convincing them that there's a world that was prepared in the first place. So like when I created single mod, I'm sorry, I've just realized I've been talking for a really long time. But when I created,
it's gonna be one of those.
when I created single mod, my thought process was I don't want to do that anymore. How do I make it possible that I can run a game where I don't do that anymore? And single mod's that game, because even if I show up unprepared, it takes me 5 minutes to make a character. So like systems for me are a means to an end, but there is a lot to them that I'm definitely going to talk about. That because while that kind of makes it sound like I don't really care about systems, I just want them to be quick and easy, there is something to be said about how systems come together and what they do, and one of the biggest reasons I don't like D&D, which I'm sure we will get into. I don't want to keep talking though, because I've talked for a really long time already.
Well, let's actually get into D&D for a second. We'll kind of go back and forth because like the whole idea here is, what is the math doing, right? And D&D makes it really easy to figure out what the math is doing because
Right.
for a large, robust system, they give you a shit ton of charts.
Yeah.
You can just look at various charts if you have the Dungeon Master Guide, and even if you don't, even if you're just looking at the player's handbook and you're looking at the player progression charts,
Right.
you can see when and where you get certain pluses to your attack modifier. And I'm going to stick mostly on attack modifier. There's a lot of other things that your characters do within the game, but D&D is kind of the central the central functioning behind D&D is the combat system. So the attack modifier is kind of the most important thing. It's the thing that everybody levels up fastest when they get new ability modifiers. It goes into their primary score, their attack modifier. And for like barbarians, that's going to be the strength. For wizard, that's intelligence, etc. Now, if you look at that score, at level, what would it be? Like 1, you have a plus probably 2. Even if you're rolling, you're probably going to get a plus 2 in your primary score, and a plus 2 in your attack bonus, equaling a plus 4. Super complicated. Well, not really. It's not that complicated. If you're playing D&D, it's easy. You roll your dice, you add your 4. That's your attack modifier, and you hope that you hit the guy.
Right.
But the game designers don't want you to hope that. The game designers want to know that most of the time for D&D, you're actually going to hit that monster.
Right.
Because they've designed the armor class for all of their monsters so that on average, you're going to be hitting that monster about 60% of the time. And it's weird to think about that, but the armor class, let's say for like a level, a CR1, which is a pretty low level monster, is the armor class is a 13. I have it written down. I got the little chart here. Generally, it's going to be a 13. Well, if you have a plus 4, your roll actually is going to average at a 15.
Right.
And the reason why is because when you look at the average scores of a dice, you divide the highest possible number by half and add 1. So on a D20, the average score, just straight roll, is 11.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you add plus 5, which is your attack modifier, to 11. Actually, it's going to be 16.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting how into the math you get on things. This was something
I know. I just rambled a bunch of math there for a second.
Which is
I hope everybody's eyes and glaze over.
I have a GED because I couldn't do math. I think that what's interesting to me about that though is, and I can't speak to the stats too heavily because I'm pretty math challenged as far as it goes. And I think you and I were actually talking about it the other day. Like you rattled off like the success rate, the average success rate during combat for D&D single mod, my game, and then what was it, like Turtles or something like that? I can't remember.
Borg, I think, and that Morkbor. I haven't
monsters,
actually. Yeah. The Apocalypse.
Yeah.
I haven't actually mapped that one out myself. That was just something I've read online. That they're really, that's a hard game.
Yeah.
That's a game where you're more likely to die than survive.
Well, and that's where they get their horror pressure, I feel like, because I mean, I could be mistaken, but I don't remember there being any sort of like insanity mechanic for Powered by the Apocalypse. But like I said, could be mistaken on that. I have not read it. Nonetheless, what I was about to say though is here's my big problem, and I think this is the difference of how I look at systems, and I think some people look at systems as to other people look at them, because when I look at a system, like obviously the designers of D&D, and even you to an extent, have looked at D&D like, this is the percentage that you're going to hit the thing, and we want them to hit that many times because this is gaming's a power fantasy, and we want you to feel powerful, so we want you to hit, and
right.
I completely understand that. Here's my problem, is when I look at a game, when I look at a system, I start rolling the system, I think to myself, does this feel like a sword fight with
Right.
dice? And does this feel like a kung fu fight? And I'm not just shitting on D&D. TMNT has been really fun. I don't think it's been fun because of the combat. Personally, I don't think the combat really simulates a kung fu fight. I think that the combat has been good because we've been kind of going out of our way to describe really intricate, things, and the combat's always had these like situational modifiers on them, and stuff like that. But I think overall, the system is like they made the system based on stats. They didn't make the system based on, does this feel like a kung fu fight? So in a sword fight, an actual sword fight, if you hit, you're probably going to kill the guy. Like, that's
Right.
how it works, Like, I would say theoretically, you're more likely to kill a guy when hitting them with a sword than you are with a gun. Like, if they were just standing still, because a sword is huge, and if it's sharp, it cleaves them. Whereas a gun does untold amounts of damage and I'm not saying guns are not lethal. I want to say that right now. They're very lethal.
Right.
But like if you're just shooting a guy, if somebody was like, shoot a guy in the shoulder and then take this sword and swing it downwards at their shoulder, you're going to literally cleave them in half with the sword. With the gun,
Right.
you're probably going to kill them, but you won't do as much physical damage to them. So like my thought process to a sword fight is if the sword hits you, you're dead. Like that's the way it is. And I want it to feel that way in a sword fight. So I don't want you to hit a lot. I want you to block a lot. And I want you to hit once for the end of it. And I want, if somebody hits you, it to not feel... it to feel like it's the end of your fucking world,
Which is why single mod is a harder game. Is not an impossible game.
Yeah.
Like there are games out there that make it like really, really hard to win. You're probably going to die.
Yeah.
And then there are games out there where you, like in single mod, for instance, and I'd say I haven't mapped it out, but in the Turtles game, which was what was the core system? Palladium. Thank you. I'm pretty sure in Palladium, I haven't actually mapped out Palladium, and I think I will. That might be the next one I play around with. The stats are harder. Older games have a tendency to be a little bit more harsh. But like the closer you get to 50-50, the harder it is. So I think Palladium's closer to 50-50 to actually hit your enemies. Your game, single mod, is very, very 50-50 almost, And in those situations, those types of games, one of the reasons that there's a big draw to those games in like the old school revival and stuff, I believe, is when you run into that kind of situation, you're more hesitant to just go and kill everything because you might die. There's a 50-50 chance you might die. You're getting close to, so you have to kind of think about it. You have to stack your odds. You have to work within the game to make it more realistic that your guy's going to maybe make it out of there. Sneak up with the guy. Don't just run in there and scream a battle cry.
Yeah, and
does that make sense?
Yeah, it's always been my thought process with that kind of stuff. And like I think that like there are games out there that do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like that's one thing about a system that like I always go at it like, does this make it feel like you're doing the thing that you want to do? Because that's really the point. Like it's a core essence of role playing, right? As far as system, as far as the maths are concerned, like the core essence of role playing, you and I can go on for hours about like it's improv and it's playing the character. But the core essence of like the system is to simulate the thing that you're doing. And I think sometimes big developers forget that. They are thinking, well, we want them to hit this many times. Okay. But I don't feel like I'm having a sword fight in a D&D game where I have a sword and I'm fighting another guy with a sword. I feel like I'm just whacking at them, and if they have less hit points, they die first, and they're just whacking at me. I would much rather have like a parry thrust strategy session going on than... And D&D has that. D&D has that. Sorry, everybody. My train of thought was killed by my child coming down. But, yeah, so I don't know. Like, I feel like sometimes they forget that. I do want to say something, though, and this is a hot take that I think most people out there are going to hate. Except maybe my game master in the garage game. I don't like combat. I hate combat in role playing games. I've come to realize that whether I'm the game master or the player, I hate it because it never works out the way you want it to, ever, and it always ruins the moment almost. And I would much rather like find some way to narratively work through the combat than actually do systems. Like I would love to play games without combat just because the combat for me. So like you set up a big bad guy as a game master, right? Like a big dude, bad guy. Like this bad guy's gonna be the bad guy. One of two things usually happens. Either that bad guy just utterly owns your players to the point where you have to use some failsafe to save them because you overpowered them, or one of your characters just like crits in like 2 moves in and murders the bad guy so that the bad guy's just dead. You can never use him in the first run in. Like that's what combat does. It's so unpredictable in any system that like it sometimes destroys everything you've got going and everything. And as a player, it's like, all right, I've trained myself in this. Okay, well, I'm rolling ones for 3.5 years, so I'm just getting my butt kicked anyway, you know? And it's just like, I don't know, combat kills me. Like, I like, it's a necessary part of a game, for the most part. I hate it. I just hate it. It takes it puts you in this point where, plus, it slows the entire point of the game down. Like, you're not, like, if your game is lasting too long, why is it? It's combat, you know? Like D&D, you can roleplay in D&D, you can get through days of content until you get to a combat, and then you're talking about a session and a half of just like, all right, now he moves, you know what I mean?
It can't slow it down.
It's so hard to find that right balance where it's fast and it's quick. And like even single mod, I like single mod. I like playing in single mod. I still think single mod's combat's too slow. Like it's so hard to find that balance where like you feel that like pace of combat, you know?
It is hard to find that balance. And balance is really the right word here, because like you want, like you were saying, like older games are pretty bad about this, where you could just walk into a room and just be annihilated. I remember there was one old AD&D module I played that was supposed to be between level 1 and 4, and we were playing all at level 4, and we were getting like hammered on this module. We're running the module rules as written, and and I'm like, how does a player level 1 do this? There's no way a level 1's gonna make it through this thing alive. We're getting our butts handed to us at level 4. But you know, that was AD&D. That was an old school game.
Yeah.
They are kind of harder. 5e, the math works out a little bit. They also, I was talking about to hit as the one of the 60% chance of hitting your enemy. They also mathed out the average score of the PCs and the for their damage, as well as the average, and sort of range the health of the monsters according to that. It all goes in the and again, you can just look at how if you know what the average score is, you can see how they're making sort of like basically a line through the game, so that you actually never are actually any stronger. You just think you are,
right
because the AC goes up at the same rate as your modifier, but your modifier is still always about 60% chance to hit through the entire time.
Right. And that's very interesting. That's something they do in video game called level scaling. Like in video games, it'll be like, oh, as you level up, all the bad guys level up too. So like you're never at a point where like it ever really matters that you leveled up. You know, it's just it's just that feeling of getting stronger. Yeah, I don't know. Like the last few characters I've made, they're in no way, shape, or form generated for combat. Like I make them specifically to avoid combat at all costs because I just don't want to do it. I don't know if Johnny will listen to this. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But if he is listening, we talked about it. He's the same way. He hates combat. He would rather never do combat. But there are people out there, and I don't want to shit on them, who live for the combat. I know Phil Billy is a big combat guy, and there's a lot of build system guys out there. It's just that's another thing too. People end up building the characters specifically for combat a lot, and that speaks more to the gamification that I don't love so much about RPGs, which where it becomes like, look at the stats on my character. Like, okay, but what's his back? Like, what's his motivation? You know, why
Yeah.
does he do that? You know, and then there's no answer for that. And like, I don't know, the
There's
system.
that
Go ahead.
fine line between a role playing game and a tactical game.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
like the old school
Yeah.
army moving around tactics,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like really immersive role playing. There's a
Yeah.
fine line between there that's sometimes really hard to walk.
Well, and I feel like it is definitely a line that a needle that gets threaded a lot nowadays too. Like much more nowadays than maybe back in the old days. I think that like we're much more closer to like that miniature game than it is to the narrative game, which is weird because a lot of the systems are more easy. But like I said, with D&D, it's like everybody's a mage. Like it's just what superpowers do you have? You know?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like when 5e first dropped, it wasn't nearly. If you're just playing straight off of like the player's handbook and you're not doing any of the added content, it's much less like that. You are very much more dependent on having a party with diverse skill sets.
Right.
But these days, with all of the different things that they've added, they kind of bloated the game so that it is very much more like everybody's just a superhero. And everybody can almost do just about anything. Like if you get the right tools, a magic spell, blah 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 blah, it becomes its own thing. Like a barbarian to me shouldn't be a caster.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Maybe once he's been, you've gone on a bunch of missions, he's got a magic axe that lets him like, I don't know, throw it really hard and it comes back to him because he's a real high level now and it's like super fantasy. But barbarian should always be a barbarian, he should always feel like he's about to scream as he's about to make his attack.
Just for the record, that's I think Phil Billy's favorite character build ever in games. Every time he plays a fantasy game, he plays a character with an axe that he can throw it and bring it back to him.
Oh, is that right?
I've noticed it. Baldur's Gate, he made like it was his favorite build. He would just throw weapons at people, and then like he found a weapon that allowed him to bring it back. And then I think in the garage game one night that he plays that I don't, he has another character that like throws an axe and calls it back, something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that like I don't want to just harp on D&D either because there's a lot of systems out there. I feel like I definitely are using D&D as an example a little bit more than I'd love to. But like, but yeah, I think that like.
For me, it's one of the easiest ones to use in an example because they show their work so much.
They do.
They
provide you, knows it too.
Yeah. They provide you all the tools to peek underneath the hood, and if you know what you're doing, get your calculator out and play around with it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a spreadsheet some guy just did. It's a spreadsheet. Somebody just put together of basically level progression and monster progression side by side, and you're able to just map it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I start designing my RPGs, my personal RPG that I want to build, I'm in the middle of still working on a solo RPG. I do a lot of it in Excel because I do like tweaking with the numbers just enough.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like I'm comfortable with the type of energy I'm going to be getting out of the game.
Which is interesting because when I do it, I have no idea what the percentages are. I'm like in my head, I'm like, well, they got a plus what? And they're rolling a d20 and he's got plus, it should be all right.
Well, okay, let me ask you a question because I'm blanking on it right now.
Okay.
For single mod, I've read it, but I haven't GM'd like single mod that isn't that is sort of more combat oriented, like the game, like our Astro Drive game, right?
Yeah.
And because I am, everybody should know, we are building another single mod setting. I'm working with Zach on it, and it's going to be a lot of fun, but it's designed very differently than it's a horror game.
Yeah.
And so there should be a sense of suspense as you go through it. It's not a combat focused game.
Yeah. If you get into combat in that game, you're in a lot more trouble because the
Yeah,
stalkers are heavily overpowered. You want to go into combat with them when you know enough about them to disable them, basically.
exactly. Overpower them. You got to learn about
Yeah.
you're hunting a monster. You have to learn about it before you go after it, or you're probably going to get killed.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Astral Drive, there's a lot of combat going
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah, there
So, but
is.
I haven't GM'd that one, and I haven't built NPCs for that version. So let me ask you: when you build an NPC, how do you do their set? Do you just like write up their sets based on the NPC, or do you think about like how hard this character should be? So I'm going to add this specific number to it.
Uh, when I build an NPC, I just build the NPC the way he should be built, like to
Okay.
like who he is as a person, which I think is also a big problem as to why my bad guys get murked a little bit quicker than I'd probably like them to, because when I build an NPC, I don't build it like, here's what my players have, here's how I'm gonna counter this with this guy. I build it more like, all right, this is what he is as a person, this is why he's
Right.
bad, this is what his skill set would be, and I think that ends up putting him in a position where like he's the bad guy and he's taking on somebody who is built to murder him. You know what I mean? He doesn't even
Right.
realize it. That being
So
said, what I do usually is I quickly do the stats the way that the base level would be. So the 12 points. I do the stats at 12 points. Then I list out every skill I think that this character should have in some way, shape, or form. Then I assign numbers to the skills. And if they're short on the amount of skill numbers they have, I slap a couple into the stat points to boost them up a little bit. Then
because
I
they're
kind
a guy who's progressed
yeah.
in his own life, basically.
Then I pull perks based on where I have perks, basically, and I don't necessarily worry about like the experience level or the thing, because honestly that's another system I'm terrible at experience points and advancing. Like, I'm terrible, honestly. We talked a lot about single mod today, so I'm going to prove that this isn't just another episode for plugging single mod. The experience system in single mod is terrible. I still don't like it. Every time, like, advancement, I hate advancement in games. I know I keep saying that, but like, my biggest problem with advancement in games is exactly what we've been talking about earlier. Is
By the way, I like the advancement in single mod. I'm as a player, I'm having a shit ton of fun with it.
That's awesome. I am very glad you like it. I think there's some slight balance issues, especially when it gets to the master phase. And the master
which I haven't
phase,
got to yet.
right? The master phase is the biggest. The master phase shows how much I don't like advancement. Here's the problem with advancement, guys. I want your character to feel like they're getting better every time we play. Just every time we play. I don't want you to have to worry about 4 sessions before leveling up. I want you to feel like you're getting better. Unfortunately, if you get better every time, you will become overpowered too damn fast. Like, it's just it's a law of anything. I don't want anybody to advance ever. I would much rather have, like, these are the stats you start with. That's it. That's your stats. And then all bad guys will have the same stats. Everybody will have the same stats. We'll just worry about role playing. But at the same time, people play games for a sense of accomplishment. They play games. It's that power fantasy that we always talk about. That's what gaming is. It's so that you, who is a store clerk or a lawyer or a car mechanic or a frickin' homemaker or whatever you do, that is not really a powerful existence. It might be very fulfilling. I'm not saying it's not. But you can then go sit down and pretend to be Hrothgar the Barbarian King or Queen. Or you could go, play the Alistair Alistair the vampire spy assassin. Yeah. Like, that's the whole point of role-playing game, is to feel that sense of like power and accomplishment, and leveling up provides that right away. That's that sense of like, yeah, I did something, I should get stuff for it. And I understand that. It's one of those systems that I can never really master well, and always seems to be counterproductive to whatever I'm trying to accomplish,
Well, let me tell you why I like the leveling system
Hit me.
in single mod.
This
Because I have actually
is not a
like
plug for single mod.
it's not, but it's a good. I mean, like single mod is a fast-paced game and it's designed to be a fast-paced game. It does what it is designed to do. If you're looking for a heavy like map strategy game, single mod's probably not the right fit.
Yeah.
It's designed to be roll, get through it and fight and have a lot of energy. And but at the same time, where my character is at in single mod is he's got a level 3. He's right before he's still in the traveler phase. He's right before he gets into the master phase of any of his abilities. And the way that the progression works is it takes a lot to get past that level. You have to acquire a lot of experience to push past level 3 in in anything, in whether it's an ability or it's a skill, which are the two things that you level up. And you don't level up your character as a single level. You level up your character in their various abilities.
Right.
Um,
And then in the master
and
phase, it's about the build, which is
right,
when the 4s and 5s become cheaper and easier to get, but they're temporary.
right, exactly.
Which is what kind of the idea that, yeah.
And when you're there, in this there's like a wall, and that's one of the things that I like about a lot of games. There's a certain point where there's like a wall, and you kind of go through more just adventuring for the sake of adventuring for a while. Because you are progressing, you are still getting, your XP is still growing, but it takes a lot longer before you can move that XP into your actual level up moments,
Right.
And that's why I like where I'm at with single mod so much. That's when I hit that wall, I was like, oh, that's actually when I sat down and did the math behind single mod, because I was like, oh, it's going to take me a really long time before I can progress any further with this character. And I mapped it all out, and that's where I'm at. I'm not really thinking so much about collecting all my XP for leveling up again. I'm thinking I've hit the wall. I'm just focused completely on what my character's going to do next.
Right.
What skills he has. How can I use these skills? All of that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's nice.
D&D, that happens. What's that?
I said that's nice. That's definitely the goal.
Yeah, and in D&D, that happens between level 4 and 12. It takes the longest amount of time to move between those levels as it does any other section of level. Between 1 and 4, you move through those pretty quick. Between like 12-ish and 20, you start speeding up on how fast. It's not quite as fast as 1 and 4, but you start speeding up on how fast you move up. There's that wall right there. You don't get a ton of progression in there.
Yeah.
And then on single mod again, my character's average roll on an attack is 17. Because divide 20 in half plus 1, that's 11. I have a 3 in my primary ability score and a 3 in my primary attacking skill, making that 6. So 11 plus 6 is actually 17. 17.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I'm fighting somebody, if he doesn't have a 3 in his defensive his agility and a 3 in his defensive skill,
yeah,
I got a little bit of an edge on him. My average scores are going to be a little bit higher than him. If he does, or if he has a higher in either one of those skills, if his average score is a little bit higher, then he's got a little bit of an edge on me. It's going to be a little harder for me to work through him.
Yeah.
But
single
it's
mod
all
also
against
has that
rolls.
puncher's chance. Yeah, single mod has the puncher's chance too, which is doesn't matter how low they are, you're rolling a d20 against a d20, and the damage is based on how much you beat the other person by. So Mr. Plus 1 versus Mr. Plus 7 can still totally kill Mr. Plus 7 by rolling a 20 while the Mr. Plus 7 rolls 1,
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden you're dealing 14 points of damage, and
that's where the heightened risk comes in. That's why it's so much. That makes it the harder game, because that damage dealt is substantial.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you don't want to just walk in there and get annihilated, because it shifts from being an attack focus skill set to oh crap, I just rolled crap. Crappy rolls really mean something in this game, guys.
It's still tough because you get that power creep in most games with the advancement system, and like, I don't know. I never feel like my power creep countermeasures are correct. So and in fairness, we have not played a lot of single mod at high level. I don't think anybody's been like messing with the master phase yet. I believe that your Astral Drive characters have hit master phase, or will once they've spent all their points. But like, it's kind of like messing with that is a different beast, I guess, than what it is before. I don't know. Systems are tough. I will say this: when I'm game mastering, I tend to gear more towards a narrative game master game. This is going to sound like a plug again, but in addition to working on Ordo, I'm working on something that is either going to be added for free to single mod or something where it's a narrative version of single mod, where it's much more geared towards like just writing a story and there's only like 2 or 3 roles here and there, and it's much more geared towards like improv, I guess, than like actual like hardcore gaming. There's still some build elements, there's still stats and stuff because I want to keep those people happy. But yeah, like that kind of thing, I would much rather game master at a table than like the stat heavy games anymore.
And there are other games out there that are more less combat oriented and that still work a lot with like sort of stats to a certain degree. One of the other things, like single mod has been a highly narrative game that we've been playing on the Astral Drive, specifically that version, because of the characters that we're playing, the GM that's running it, there have been plenty of moments in there where the most heart-pounding moment for my character, for me, was not in combat. It was whether or not they were going to see through my lies.
That was really fun. That was a really fun storyline to cultivate. I'm not going to lie. Like, I was very happy you played that character because, yeah, you're overpowered, but everybody in the universe wants to kill you, and if they find out who you are, they will kill you. Like, yeah. I think that was a really fun. I think everybody's had a really fun arc when it comes to Astral Drive.
Phil's character has been, Phil is a very build guy. Like, he's the build master. We've had him on the show before. He loves that. But his character has also had a great arc. He feels like the center of the show to me, because he's the most heroic kind of guy.
You say that, I feel like I've made a mistake, because I love Phil's character. I am not trying to knock Phil's character in any way. I want you all to feel like the center of your own game. Like, I definitely don't want like Phil's character to feel like the lead in this thing.
Don't get me wrong. Everybody gets their moment to shine. Don't get me wrong. Everybody is there. But like, if I was going to turn single mod into or Astral Drive into a book, Phil would be the hero. Because I'm a freaking like vampire. I murder people in that game.
You got some sympathetic storylines going.
True. I'm not saying that my character doesn't count or none of the characters. It's a full cast.
I like that he has a heroic goal. Like the goal is to like save his kind, which made some very bad mistakes to be hunted, but he's trying to save his people. I like that goal. I like Brian's character too. I love the slow progression of his character of like having to survive an ordeal that his character would never survive, and train with this weird hunter orc, and now he's back and he doesn't want to be with his family. He wants to get off his planet as fast as possible because he doesn't feel at home. I think that's a really cool arc too. Nullis's arc is great. I'm not knocking Nullis's arc. He is the quintessential like gunslinger hero, like tortured hero backstory. I think all 3 of your characters are just awesome, and I want to give them all the love that they deserve. You keep saying that. I'm like, no, I don't want him to be the hero. I want you all to be the heroes. You're all the heroes.
Don't get me wrong.
You're the Power Rangers.
We're heroes of our own.
The Power Rangers without a Red Ranger. Like that's what I want.
Yeah. Okay. I can definitely. Yeah. the story doesn't flow so that it centers too much along any in
Yeah.
particular character at all. Don't get me wrong about that. Like, don't get me wrong in that. It's just my the goals are laid out in different archetypes, I guess, archetypical path. Because my goal has a different arc. I designed an assassin. You know, he's
Yeah.
gonna be he acts like an assassin. That's
Yeah.
his archetype.
Yeah.
And Gerald Abrego. He's such a comical character.
He is.
Some of the funniest moments I was about falling over,
Yes, yeah.
dying laughing, was how Brian plays that character.
Yeah, he does play really well. I love the.
We're just going into our own strengths, you know.
Yeah, the awkward kind of, the awkward in the weird moment sort of situations. I think everybody's playing him really good. I'm intrigued to see where that game goes. Just so that everybody knows, I definitely forgot to post an episode. We have another episode. It's going up this Wednesday, I promise. Or it has been up when you will be watching this. I somehow totally forgot to post it last Wednesday. I feel like a poop. But in any case, back to the systems, the maths.
Right, the maths.
What we're supposed to be on. We digressed a little bit.
We knew we would. We're talking about math. There's no way not to digress when you're to make math.
To make math fun, you got to make math
Yeah.
fun. What's weird is if my teacher in high school had taught me math in this facet, I don't think I would have failed math, because I will say the maths on this kind of thing is when you get me excited. Not when you're just like, 2 + 2 = whatever, blah, blah, blah. But when you're like, okay, you have a random chance to do a thing. This is the thing. Make it feel like this thing. Like, that is when you really engage my brain a little bit. Like, when you're like, oh, man, how do I make somebody... I think I said this on either I said this on a previous podcast or I said it to you. I can't remember. So if I said it on a previous podcast, I'm sorry for repeating myself. But I love the idea that I love the idea of making somebody who is sitting at a table, drinking a soda, eating Cheetos, rolling dice, can feel like they are having a sword fight on top of a train, going 100 miles per hour. And that to me is such an interesting thing, because there is no two things that are more opposite in my brain than like you having a sword fight on top of a train and you sitting at a table stationary and rolling dice, but yet to make one feel like the other, that is truly like, I love that. I love to think about that. I love to like, ooh, how do I make this fight feel like a fight? How do I make this feel like a boxing match? How do I make it feel like you're being hunted? When you're sitting, especially the horror games, like we've been writing this horror game, which is really interesting to me because, I play a horror game with friends, and like, it's really interesting when you feel like the actual fear, because you're like, there's nothing to be afraid of right here. I am in a well-lit room, sitting around a table with 9 other people playing with dice and paper, but suddenly I feel this like creeping dread, and like that kind of stuff is to me where a system and the maths shine, because they can make that happen for you like nothing else. As much as I hate combat, as much as I hate advancement, those systems, if they're done well, can truly make you feel like you could do anything. It makes you feel like you're living in that world, and that's the coolest thing, when you can like transcend reality and actually experience something you can't possibly experience. You'll never be able to experience, but you experience it through the game. That's one of the things that I love about gaming in general, role-playing games or video games, is when you can have that moment where you're like, this is what it was like to be a pirate. This is what it's like to be a barbarian in a fantasy world. I'm living that, even though you're not. And and the math make that happen. Without the math, it does not happen. The systems are how that happens. And I think that is really, at the core, the coolest part about systems and math.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. That is, it's like, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so interested in the math aspect. Like, I love fantasy, I love lore, I love magic in games, in movies, books, all of that stuff. I love peeling back, like and tinkering with the idea of how the world works. And that's what the math does for me on these games.
Yeah.
I can look underneath the hood. I can see how the world works a little bit. And it's almost like it gives me the same satisfaction that I would get from reading a encyclopedia of all of the Star Wars like spaceships.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, cool, that spaceship does this, and that lightsaber does this, and all of that other stuff. I get that lore, that richness out of it. In the same way, when I look at the mathematics here.
Have you ever gotten the Matrix feeling too? I get that sometimes, where you're just like walking around in the real world, and you're like, where would the dice roll be? Where's the stat check here? I see it. Like it's like frickin' Neo seeing ones and numbers. You're like, I'm in the car. I know where the roll would be here. That kind of stuff is really interesting to me too.
Oh, 100%. Like last week, I had just a miserable week. It was one of those weeks where everything was going wrong, and I was like, okay, the GM is rolling really high, and I am rolling really low this week.
It's all ones for me. All ones for me.
All ones. And then you start to stop and think, like, okay, I'm only going to do things this week that I have a high stat score in. I'm not doing anything with it because I'm going to die if I do that. It's game over.
How can I make these rolls better with my perks?
Exactly.
What perks do I have? I'm funny slightly. No, that's not going to help me here.
Yeah, exactly. It was a rough week, and that's when the metaphor starts coming out, just so I can survive it.
I'm very heavy. Could I sit on my problems? No, that's not gonna work.
Exactly. Well, man, I think we've like nerded out about math quite a bit today.
That was a lot of fun.
It was. I hope everybody else out there has gotten a little bit of an idea as how to. Oh, maybe a fraction of an idea how to peel back the mechanics of their favorite RPGs.
Yeah.
And hopefully if they're playing with them, maybe it gives them a new insight, out there. Think about math in a slightly different way. What's the percentage? Maybe you want your characters to be a little bit more threatened, get that a little bit more 50-50 chance in there.
Well, and what are you trying to accomplish? For me, that's like moment one when you're designing a game. What are you trying to accomplish, like with that game? Like, are you trying to simulate a specific thing? Are you trying to make a generalized thing that can be changed to a specific thing? Are you trying to be narrative? Are you trying to be stat heavy? Like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Exactly. And how do you make it into a dice roll? So okay. I think we're pretty good for today's episode. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that was good. I think that was a fun episode right there. Fun episode.
All right. Is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
We've been a little content light on the channel. I can assure you guys we're going to have some content coming up. It's just been very busy with recording and stuff like that. And it's been very hard to schedule things and whatnot, but I've got some video game content coming up. You can check out Old Man Gaming if you're watching that there. If you're watching this there, that's great. If not, watch it on Wizards Respite and then go check Old Man Gaming for a lot of different stuff. We have all the TTRPG stuff we do here. We also have all the video game stuff there. I'd appreciate it. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I think next week we're doing TMNT. So check that out on Thursday night.
And as always, this is on the wizardsrespite.com. I have a bunch of articles on there that goes into all kinds of things gaming. I kind of do what we've done today with the math on all different sort of subjects on TTRPG, from how to design characters to what the industry is doing, what is the most popular genre of games. I take a big picture and peel back and look underneath the hood on the hobby as a whole on the Wizards Respite. So check that out. I also got shirts I'm selling there. Got a new design made up. Yeah. It's about to drop this week.
Nice.
So very excited.
New shirts.
And yeah, that's what I got. Buy shirts, yes.
Buy shirts. Buy merchandise. Buy shirts.
And buy single mod. Itch.io.
Yeah, I guess we talked about it enough. If you want to buy a single mod, it's $6 on itch.io. Only $6. It's a nice, quick, easy read with some fun build mechanics, but also super simple. We have Ordo coming for it soon. And if you purchase it, anything I add to it You get basically for free. I mean, not Ordo, we're going to charge for the setting, but it's a living document as far as I'm concerned. So anytime I add new rules to it, to the base guide, or I correct anything, you get that for free. You just have to go back and download it.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for listening, and until next time, everybody, keep rolling them dice.